The battle cries ring out. Russia's invading hordes go charging towards a Ukrainian defensive position. Following orders from a commander who knows exactly how this battle is going to turn out, Russia is going to lose. Why? Because its soldiers aren't equipped with armor, like tanks or infantry fighting vehicles. They're not even riding motorbikes, which could get them enough speed and agility to avoid Ukraine's drones. No, they're riding in the fight on something more equine. Four-legged beasts of burden are now carrying Russia's forces into battle. Just look how desperate Vladimir Putin has become. Russian troops are now riding horses into the Ukraine war's drone hell. Worse yet, as United 24 media reported on October 7, the Russian soldier who was on horseback has already been killed. The outlet states that 2025 marks the first time since the 1950s that Russia has deployed cavalry against an enemy. And this doesn't mean merely using horses or donkeys to carry equipment here. Russia has sent a kitted out soldier into an assault on horseback, and for some reason seems to have expected that soldier to make it through Ukraine's waves of drones to reach some sort of position. It makes no sense. Even without the drones, a horseback rider doesn't stand much of a chance in modern warfare. It only takes one shot from a rifle to take out a cavalry unit in the modern age. This isn't medieval warfare. It's not an age when soldiers took minutes to reload a musket before they could take a pot shot at a horseback rider. It's 2025. There are drones, rifles, mines. Practically any weapon that Ukraine might decide to bring to bear is enough to take out a Russian horseback rider. Of course, it ended up being a drone that finished off the unfortunate Russian cavalryman. And footage confirms the entire fiasco. The video was shared by the Yigal Levin X account, which noted that it was shot by a drone being operated by a member of Ukraine's 132nd Battalion. The footage seems nondescript enough at first. It shows what in other circumstances could be a beautiful countryside setting, shot from the perspective of a first-person view or FPV drone as it flies along a natural trail. As the drone idles forward, what first appeared like a blob in the near distance starts to come into focus. It's not a blob, it's a horse. Perhaps somehow, amidst all of the warfare in Ukraine's countryside, a single wild horse had managed to survive and was wandering through the fields. But no, that's not what's happening. As the drone draws closer, it soon becomes clear that a man is tending to the horse. He's dressed in military fatigues and he has no idea that the drone is appearing. That man is a Russian soldier, and he's about to become a casualty. As soon as the operator realizes what they're seeing through the eyes of their FPV drone, the drone speeds up. It zeroes in on the soldier, who realizes how much danger he's in far too late. A last-ditch attempt to jump away from his horse fails, and Ukraine's drone scores a direct hit on the ground between them. Both horse and rider died because Putin has become so desperate that he's sending his soldiers into battle on animals instead of armored vehicles. Defense Blog, which also carried the video, says that the targeted horse rider wasn't some lone maverick who decided that it would be better to attack on horseback. He was part of an entire cavalry detachment that Russia used to storm a Ukrainian defensive position. Obviously, that assault failed, with Defense Blog adding that the Russian soldiers resorted to dismounting from their horses and using them as shields in an attempt to avoid Ukraine's drones. That lends a new perspective to the FPV drone footage. Perhaps the Russian soldier wasn't idly tending to his horse at all. He was more likely hiding behind it, only to be undone by having positioned his horse in the wrong direction. Ukraine soldiers don't feel good about any of this. Creating more Russian casualties is obviously Ukraine's priority. However, the country's soldiers would much rather not be sending drones to explode on horses. Defense Blog reports on the comments of one Ukrainian service member who sums up the shock and sadness of these types of incidents. The horses, of course, are a pity, but no matter how you look at it, it's a combat unit. Sad, yes, but the work is being done to reduce human casualties, the service member said. One could almost argue that this is callous on Putin's part. There's no need for Russia to be using horses to launch assaults in 2025. Even the most basic of civilian vehicles would offer more speed and strength. But Putin doesn't seem to care. horses are a way to transport his cannon-fodder troops to the places where they're supposed to die to soak up Ukraine's ammunition, so Russia's military is happy to use them. Ukraine soldiers, as the service member says, have to treat those horses as military units, which means they have to be taken out. What's evident here is a very nasty use of horses by Russia. But it's not the first time Russia has used these types of animals in Ukraine. Back in February, Newsweek reported that Russia had started to deploy both donkeys and surprisingly camels into Ukraine. In both cases, the animals weren't being ridden into battle. Rather, Russia was using them to shuttle equipment between units, ensuring that Russia's soldiers had access to necessary goods that could no longer be transported by vehicles because too many of Russia's mechanized units had been destroyed or disabled. The outlet even carried a quote from the Russian State Duma Defense Committee member, Lieutenant General Viktor Sobolev, who implied that Russia was taking inspiration from World War II. Back then, Russia used dogs and donkeys to ferry essentials around. It was now being forced to do the same in Ukraine. There are currently very big difficulties in providing units and subdivisions, including that is, assault squads and groups and so on, with ammunition, military technical equipment and food too, Sobolev claimed. He went on to add that dogs and cats are also being deployed because they help to fight mice in Russia's trenches. Sobolev also made mention of horses, noting that they'd also been put to work in the trenches. As for camels, a photograph started doing the rounds on social media in February, shared by the Meanwhile in Ukraine Facebook account. The photo shows 3 Russian soldiers and a camel. The channel itself says that it hopes that the image was photoshopped. However, camels are raised in the Russian republics of Tuva and Kalmyka, so it's possible that the photo is real. The Moscow Times also confirmed the Russian military's use of donkeys in a March 2025 piece. It also linked that usage to a lack of frontline equipment, while noting that both horses and donkeys were being used by Russia to transport equipment. Apparently, this is a normal practice, the outlet quotes Sobolev as saying. Perhaps it is. One could even argue that using these types of animals is better than having soldiers carrying equipment, at least over short distances. However, what went down in early October is very different from Russia's military using horses and donkeys to hoist equipment around. The soldier that Ukraine's drone took out was a cavalryman. He, along with his unit, has launched an attack on horseback, only to discover very quickly why that was a bad idea. Now that Russia has seen that its cavalry idea is so vulnerable to drones, one might assume it would abandon the concept. But that would overestimate Russia's capacity to learn from its failures. Not only is Russia okay with its soldiers riding into battle on horseback, but it looks like cavalry training is about to be formalized in the Russian military. To repeat that, cavalry training is being formalized, which means that what seems to be an isolated incident of Russian soldiers attacking on horseback may soon become a regular occurrence in Ukraine. That news comes from Medusa, which covered an October report published by the pro-Russian news outlet Kommersant that claimed Russia is looking to conduct a full-blown revival of its cavalry units. The Russian outlet spoke to the unnamed commander of Russia's Storm Special Forces unit, who said on Russian state television that the soldiers under his command are now learning how to ride on horseback. The reasons why are strange to say the least. The commander says that horses have better instincts than humans, meaning they're less likely to step on landmines. Plus, they have better eyesight, allowing them to navigate through the darkness, and they're able to deal with off-road conditions. The commander even explained how his troops would use their horses. The tactic involves 2 men riding on a single horse. One steers and the other provides fire cover. Upon arrival at the assault site, both fighters dismount and take the next enemy stronghold, the commander said. There are obvious holes to pick in all of these comments. For instance, it's believable that a horse is more able to navigate in the dark than a human who isn't equipped with night vision equipment. But how is that going to help the soldiers riding the horse? They won't be able to see where they're going, and they certainly have no chance of identifying or destroying incoming threats before it's too late. It seems Russia's riders just have to rely on their horses' instincts to get them to where they need to go. As for the 2-person approach the Storm Commander discusses, surely providing fire cover is a lot harder on a horse that's jostling its riders around than it is to offer that cover from the ground. Would a Russian soldier, who's already sitting 2 to a horse in all of their combat gear, really be able to shoot down an incoming Ukrainian drone as their comrade rides? it seems unlikely. To many, it will even seem ludicrous. Plus, as Medusa notes, horses come with certain disadvantages that the Storm Commander doesn't seem to account for. Yes, the animals are quick and agile, but they also need to be trained and fed, which are both actions that cost time and resources that Russia doesn't really have. Plus, horses have a lower load capacity than vehicles. As mentioned earlier, even if Russia is struggling to send soldiers into assaults with armor, even a civilian vehicle seems like it would be a better choice than a horse. As for landmines, a horse may or may not be heavy enough to trigger an anti-tank mine, but an anti-personnel mine, that's a different story. Given that Ukraine acquired this latter type of mine from the US in November 2024, odds are good that they're being used to defend against Russia's attacks too. A horse wouldn't stand a chance against such a mine, neither would the horse's rider. So, the burning question has to be asked: why? Despite the Storm Commander's claims, horses aren't being ridden into battle because they're more effective than tanks, armored vehicles, or practically any other type of vehicle that Russia could use instead. That much is obvious. A horse, as fast as it might be, can't outrun an FPV drone. Pet MD says that a thoroughbred horse can maybe hit speeds of 44 miles per hour at full pace over a short distance. Russia won't be using thoroughbreds. Its horses will be much slower and their riders aren't world-class jockeys. Pet MD adds that the top galloping speed of a horse in the general home environment is between 25 and 35 miles per hour. The average horse also wouldn't be able to maintain this pace over a long distance. By contrast, even the most basic Ukrainian FPV drone can hit and maintain speeds of 37 miles per hour, with many being even faster. Even if a horse could outrun a drone over a short distance, it won't be long before the horse slows down and the drone catches up. Combat effectiveness doesn't enter the equation here. So, again, it has to be asked: why? United 24 has some possible reasons for why Russia is digging back into centuries-old tradition by sending soldiers into battle on horseback, starting with Russia's love affair with horses. It says that horses are woven so deeply into the mythology of past Russian military success that their use in 2025 is almost more symbolic than it is practical. But even that's a distortion. The Cossacks, who were famous for their use of horses, formed major communities in both what is now Ukraine, particularly the Zaporizhian Cossacks, and in Russia's Don region. But while those traditions share deep roots, Ukraine isn't the one riding horses into battle today. Russia is. Still, the Russian love of horses endured even into the 20th century, and to be fair to Russia, the beasts had their uses even as recently as World War II. This is evident in a June 1942 piece from The War Illustrated, which has been shared by Traces of War. Russia has millions of horses in service with the Red Army. Without them, in spite of the railways and the immense number of motor vehicles, it would be impossible to maintain the constant stream of supplies to the millions of men holding the millions of miles long front, The War Illustrated said over 80 years ago. Hundreds of thousands are actually in the firing line, hauling guns and ammunition wagons. Great numbers more are harnessed to ambulances and supply vehicles. That sounds familiar. It's precisely what horses and their like were being used for in Ukraine before they started being deployed as cavalry units. After World War II, United 24 says, the horse became a symbol of political power in the Soviet Union. Propaganda posters often showed Russian soldiers on horseback, and it's in this that one may see a glimpse of the reason why Russians are now riding horses into battle. Footage has shown one of those riders get taken out by a drone. It's possible that very different images are being circulated in Russia. Perhaps images of Russian soldiers bravely riding, harkening back to the Soviet era to which Putin appears intent on returning to the world. This talk of symbolism is all well and good. It might be even something that Russia would encourage, if not for the fact that the only reason horses are being discussed is because a Russian cavalryman was destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. But strip away the symbolism, and there are three real reasons why Russia is using horses in Ukraine. Russia is running out of fuel, it's lost too many vehicles, and its soldiers are absolutely exhausted. On the fuel front, Ukraine has spent the last couple of months devastating Russia's oil refining capacity. The BBC reports that Ukraine has conducted strikes against 21 of Russia's 38 large oil refineries since January 2024. In August 2025 alone, Ukraine targeted 14 refineries with drone attacks. September saw it hit 8, and in most cases, these weren't isolated strikes. Ukraine would strike, wait a short while, and then strike again to ensure that the refineries it put offline stayed offline. The impact of these strikes has been monumental on Russia. The country is currently going through a fuel crisis because Ukraine has managed to take out up to 40% of Russia's refining capacity by late September and early October 2025, following months of cumulative strikes throughout the year. While this is hurting everyday Russians due to domestic gasoline shortages, it's also having an impact on the front lines. The Ukrainian army's commander-in-chief, Alexander Syrskyi, made that much clear toward the end of September. The capabilities of the enemy's military-industrial complex have been significantly reduced. We can see this on the battlefield, Syrskyi said when speaking to Ukrainian journalists. This is a fuel crisis in Russia, which directly affects logistics and the supply of its army. In short, Russia doesn't have enough gasoline to send to the front lines. Horses don't run on gasoline, so using them is a problem solved, at least in Putin's mind. Even if Russia had a steady supply of gasoline and the supply lines to get it to its troops, it wouldn't matter. Gasoline, along with diesel, is useless when lacking the vehicles that they fuel. Therein lies another reason why Russia is using horses to launch assaults. It's running out of tanks and armored vehicles, and it has been for a while. In July, Novaya Gazeta reported that Russia is running on close to empty when it comes to military vehicles. It cited statistics shared by the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, which said that Russia only has 46% of its pre-war reserves of tanks and 42% of its infantry fighting vehicles left. Those numbers may seem fine at first, however, most of the remains of Russia's vehicle stockpiles are old Soviet-era pieces of armor that are in terrible states of disrepair. At this rate, the ISW says, Russia will be out of usable armor reserves entirely by the end of 2025. Russia's outlook may not be quite that bleak, but it does shed some more light on why it's using horses in Ukraine. The vehicles Russia's military needs, whether that be for transporting equipment or launching assaults, are in much shorter supply than they were when Putin launched his invasion. In the use of horses, there's desperation. The Storm Unit commander mentioned earlier may try to dress up the use of horses as a deliberate tactic. However, it's really an admission by Moscow that it doesn't have enough equipment to send to its troops. Some are still able to ride into battle on armor. Those who can't seem to be resorting to horses. And finally, there's the exhaustion factor. Perhaps because of its armor and fuel issues, Russia has increasingly relied on small infantry assaults ahead of the larger mechanized assaults it favored earlier in the Ukraine war. RBC Ukraine reported on this approach back in July, noting that some of Russia's infantry units are as small as 3 or 4 people. Those units are supposed to infiltrate Ukraine's defenses and bed in long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But think about what this approach must mean for Russia's soldiers. They're being forced to march over long distances, carrying whatever equipment they have to conduct their assaults, all while trying to hide away from Ukraine's drones. Exhaustion has to set in to the point where even the units that manage to infiltrate Ukraine's defenses aren't able to put up much of a fight when they're found. At least with horses, these small units can cover more distance quickly while relying on their horses to carry heavy gear. But again, this is what modern military vehicles are supposed to be doing. Not very vulnerable animals that have no resistance to any of the weapons Ukraine uses. The video of a Russian cavalryman being taken out by Ukrainian drone is many things. It's humiliating for Russia because it exposes just how bad the country's military situation has become. The video is almost pitiable, as it shows the last moments of panic for a Russian soldier before he and a horse, who should never have been on the battlefield, are eliminated. But most of all, the video showcases Russia's desperation in Ukraine. Using horses isn't symbolic as much as the Kremlin may want to act like it is. It's foolish, and Russia is already being made to pay the price. Still, it's not like Russia is enjoying much more success with its modern weapons. Several of its supposedly unstoppable weapons have been wiped off the map as Ukraine has destroyed them all. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of Russia's weirdest tactics in the Ukraine war.